Hey y'all, today I'm going to show you how to make my gluten-free chocolate sweet rolls. Let me just say that these are one of my favorite sweet rolls I make, and that's saying a lot because I make plenty of them. They start with my GF sweet dough and are slathered with homemade pastry cream and sprinkled with chunks of chocolate, and then they get rolled up, baked, and iced with a thin glaze. There's everything you would expect from a chocolate sweet roll and more. So let's get into it and I'll show you how to make them. We're starting, of course, with my gluten-free sweet dough. If you haven't seen me make this before, let me just run real quickly through that so I can show you how to make it. It's so simple. Just add 360 grams of whole milk to a mixing bowl, followed by 10 grams of whole psyllium husks, 24 grams of instant yeast, 200 grams of granulated sugar, 169 grams of softened butter, 2 eggs, 490 grams of Kim's gluten-free bread flour blend, 6 grams of kosher salt, and 7 grams of baking powder. Knead or beat this on medium speed until a smooth, cohesive dough forms. Scrape the sides into the center of the bowl, cover the bowl, and let the dough rise until doubled in size, and then refrigerate for at least 6 hours, preferably overnight. For these rolls, I'm only using half the dough, which I have the measurements for in the blog post. But if I were you, I'd just make the entire amount of dough because you can always find other things to make with the rest of it on my site. We'll also need vanilla pastry cream, and to make this, it's so easy, y'all. In a medium saucepan, I added 1 cup or 240 grams each of whole milk and heavy cream, and I heated this to a simmer. In a small bowl, I added 1/2 cup or 100 grams of sugar and 1/4 cup or 30 grams of cornstarch, and I whisked them together real quick. Then I added in 6 egg yolks and whisked until thick and smooth. I poured in a little of the hot cream mixture and whisked constantly to temper the eggs, and then slowly added the rest of the hot cream mixture. I poured the whole thing back into the saucepan and heated it over medium heat, whisking constantly until it began to thicken. I continued whisking for at least another 30 seconds to a minute to activate the cornstarch. I removed it from the heat, poured it through a sieve back into the bowl, and added 2 tablespoons or 28 grams of softened butter and a tablespoon of vanilla extract. I whisked those in until the butter melted, covered the whole thing with plastic wrap so that it was touching the surface to prevent a skin from forming, and refrigerated it until well chilled. Now I'll just roll out this dough to a long rectangle on a well-floured surface. The size isn't quite as important, y'all, as the thickness of the dough. So I'm going for about in between like 1/8 and a 1/4 of an inch thick. More closer to the 1/8 inch. You don't want it to be too thick. And add extra flour to prevent sticking if necessary. The flour that I always use for dusting, it's the same flour that's in the recipe. So in this case, it's going to be my gluten-free bread flour blend. I'm just going to trim away some of this side here to make it more even. And then I'll brush away this extra flour. Okay, I'll grab my pastry cream and I'll whip it up just a little bit. This pastry cream sets up really firmly, which is really great, so it needs to be stirred or whisked before using. And I'll just dollop this all over the top. And then spread it with an offset spatula to the edges. The amount of pastry cream I'm using here is actually half the recipe. You can either just make a half recipe, cut the whole recipe in half, or make the whole recipe and then split it in half. That's what I always do because I can always find something else to do with the other half, like just eat it because it's essentially homemade vanilla pudding. But I have several recipes on my site that use pastry cream, so all you need to do is just search pastry cream and you'll find all of those. Then I'll just sprinkle all of this chopped chocolate on top of the pastry cream, and make sure to get every bit of this because you want chocolate in every single bite even the really finely grated chocolate. Okay, I'm going to do something I never do, and that's cut these into strips. I know other bloggers tend to do this, but I think for regular cinnamon rolls, it's just not necessary, at least not with my dough. But for these in particular, I wanted something that is really, really thin, and that's hard to get if you roll it up into a log first. So I'm going to trim off the edges, and I'll bake off these edges separately so they won't go to waste. My pastry wheel is a smaller one, so it tends to get stuck in this pastry cream. So just be careful if yours is this small too. I should have used my pizza wheel. That's huge, but it's fine. I'm cutting these into roughly 1-inch strips, and I should get about 10 rolls out of this. Now I'll just roll each one up. And I'm going to place them onto a parchment-lined baking sheet a couple of inches apart. And then I'll cover them loosely with plastic wrap, and I'm going to let them proof until not quite doubled in size. But let me show you my new favorite kitchen gadget, especially during the winter months. It is so cold in my house, always it seems. So I'm going to leave a link for this if you want one. It's called Cozy Bread, and it's a plug-in little mat that has a control here to turn it on, and then you can adjust the temperature. So right now it's super cold in my house, so I'm setting the temp to about 100 degrees, and I'll just put the rolls on this. I have a towel underneath, and then I'll pull the towel up and around it slightly. You can use this for bulk proofing and anything else you need to proof. It's so great, you guys, when your house is really cold like mine is. So I'll see you back here when these are proofed and ready for the oven. All right, y'all, as you can see, these are noticeably bigger, but they're not quite doubled in size. And I added the scraps to a ring on the side, so I'll bake those as well. And I'm going to bake all of these in a 350-degree Fahrenheit oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, or until they're very light golden brown. So meanwhile, while they're baking, I'll go ahead and mix together a quick thin glaze for brushing on the top. This is 1 cup or 125 grams of powdered sugar, and I'll add a splash or so of vanilla. And I have about 1/3 cup or 80 grams of warm milk here, but I'm only going to add about half of that, maybe 1/4 cup or so. That might be all I need. Actually, this is pretty thin. You want it to run off the tines of the whisk like this. Okay, this is perfect. Let's get those rolls out of the oven. Ooh, y'all, look at these. They're perfect. But they're not quite done yet. We got to grab a brush so I can brush the glaze on them. And be generous with this glaze, y'all. Make sure you glaze them while they're hot right from the oven, so that all that glaze can kind of sink in and you're just left with this like glossy top to them without a huge amount of glaze on top. Oh my gosh, y'all. I got to let these cool just a little bit, and then I cannot wait to dig into one of these. All right, y'all, check this out. This is just one of the many things you can make with my gluten-free sweet dough. It's so soft, of course, and you never know it's gluten-free. I got to unwind it first and take an outside piece. Look at that. It's heavenly. The chocolate isn't like over the top. It's just the right amount. And that pastry cream, it bakes into the rolls just enough to make them creamy, but it'll leave everyone guessing what's in there that's so, so creamy. I think if you bake these for your gluten-free Valentine, they'll love you even more than they already do. Enjoy!